few people have heard about the burnout gap, which disproportionately affects women.
Our pussies are dry. What is this whole notion of an economy, a system, a structure saying that my whole value is my productivity and my work?
Sometimes you look at that and you feel so helpless because it feels like the whole world needs to change. Any belief system that's not feasible or serving you is something that can be challenged.
The only thing consistent about the female biology is that it's consistently shifting and changing. We have to work differently. We have to ebb and flow with our biology and with our needs as they ebb and flow throughout the month.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 5 of the Conscious Economics Podcast. I am your host, Rhiannon Rosalind, and I have my co-host back.
Yay! Aseel, Baba, a financial therapist, and obviously Rhiannon's business partner. We're so excited to be starting this beautiful episode with an amazing guest and a sister that we're bringing.
Thank you for flying in, Dr. Kayla Osterhoff.
Yes.
Kayla is a neuropsychophysiologist, women's health expert, extraordinaire, doing so many groundbreaking things, not only in the US, but all around the world. And of course, our lead researcher for our Heartwork Project. So Kayla, can you tell our audience a little bit about what a neuropsychophysiologist does?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you both for having me. I'm very honored to be here and be part of this project. As you mentioned, I'm a neuropsychophysiologist, which is the study of the mind, the brain, and the physiology. So essentially bringing these three systems together to understand the human experience and human health.
And Aseel, do you want to just ground a little bit of your piece that you bring to the table through financial therapy?
So financial therapy, for a lot of people, is still a relatively new term, and that's essentially the study of the relationship we have with money, and that involves our thought, beliefs, attitudes, mindsets, and emotions. And also understanding the somatic experience around that, the nervous system, and the triggers and how finance can bring up a whole host of different experiences to the table. And what financial therapy allows us to do is understand the layers below the behavior so we can address them from a much more core perspective, leading to sustainable and long-term changes.
Yeah. And I'm here obviously as the founder of Conscious Economics and having over 15 plus years working as an entrepreneur myself, working on systemic change for women, for building a more equitable, inclusive, healthy economy. And so today, I think this intersection of the three of us, I'm really excited because I really want to explore a topic that you and I, Aseel, have been talking about for quite some time, which is the rise of the female breadwinner. So at this point in Canada, we have, and this stat is a little bit old, we don't have the newest, but it is on the rise, so I imagine it's higher now. 32.5% of Canadian households have a female breadwinner. At that particular juncture, we're looking now at the intersection of burnout because you have done such fascinating work on what you call the burnout gap. What is the burnout gap?
Yeah, so many of us are familiar with the gender gap in terms of the world of economics and the corporate structures in space. But few people have heard about the burnout gap, which is similar in terms that it is something that disproportionately affects women. So essentially what this is that women do not really understand their bodies and how their bodies operate and function. And so, of course, because they don't understand that, they also don't understand that they have very unique needs in terms of their health, in terms of regulating their nervous system, in terms of how they need to operate and move through the world in harmony with their female biology and how it works. And so because there's dissonance there, because their needs are not being met, because they're not understood what they are, women are experiencing alarming rates of burnout, especially in the workforce, right? And this is because women are taking on more and more responsibility in addition to responsibilities that they already have in a traditional view and standpoint. And so this often is called the lost generation, which isn't our generation, it's actually our mother's generation, where it was the rise of feminism and women were stepping into the workforce in droves as a result of war. And they were taking on this new identity as the career woman and as sometimes as the breadwinner is what we're seeing now. And they also still had all of the home and family responsibilities as well. So women like my mother, for instance, she was one of the first to be encouraged to go out and have a career, but also expected to run the home and have all the home responsibilities and be in charge of the child rearing and all of that as well. And so I saw, even in my own mother, a huge burnout happen and huge health issues, especially around mental health, because she had so many responsibilities and pressures, and she was trying to be all things, both things, and she didn't understand her body. She didn't understand what her needs were, and she got completely burnt out. And I see this over and over and over. I've experienced it myself. I know both of you have throughout your lives as well, and probably all of the women who are tuning in.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. What about your mom? And like, that's kind of an interesting reflection to just go around. Like,
so I actually reflect a lot about my mom and the intergenerational part, even beyond that. So my grandma was illiterate. She couldn't read or write. She never worked. She had a lot of wisdom from lived experience, obviously, and I cherish her. God bless her soul. But she didn't contribute financially to the household and had very, very basic financial literacy. Just as far as negotiating with the back home, like you buy your groceries from the balcony and you throw the basket and you literally reel them. It was that kind. So she had negotiating skills with what do you call this person who sells groceries?
In the street with the basket? I don't know.
Uber Eats?
Yeah.
With that person. Anyways.
Yeah.
So my mom, when she had me, my dad insisted that she stays home to raise the kids because they were planning to expand the family. I never knew that because all I know is I've known my mom to be a homemaker all my life, but I didn't know that she actually at that point resented my dad for that request. She ended up staying back and she couldn't get herself back to work even when we became independent and eventually left the house and became our own people. And I think that created a lot of confusion for my mom. She tried to find her identity in different ways, like who am I beyond the role of a mother, especially when your adult kids are leaving the homes and starting lives on their own. It was a major thing for me to witness. And till this day, my mom hasn't worked and just couldn't find herself back.
Do you think that is part of the drive of you being so avid that you want to be a working mom?
So what's interesting about that is I once shared a vision I had with a friend of mine, and it was quite an exciting vision when I shared it. I said I had this vision of me pregnant because I was pregnant at the time. Two passions of mine is being a mother and being a speaker and doing the work that I do. And my vision was my water breaking on stage as I'm giving this amazing impactful speech and like having this amazing impact and saying, okay, have a good day. I have to go to the hospital and give birth now. And I don't remember if it was a daydream or if it was a dream. And I think I shared that with you as well. But my friend brought this to my attention. And I was sharing that vision from a space of excitement. It brought me joy and purpose. And she said, Aseel, this is probably the most stressful situation I can possibly imagine. How is it that this situation brings you joy? And she said, that's a really trauma response. And sometimes when you rebel against the circumstances you grew up witnessing, you go to the other side just to prove that you can do it. So I'm constantly adding things to my life as far as accomplishments and milestones plus family goals. Like quite literally the other day you and I were having a business meeting and I'm telling you about my desire to have another child and the 600 projects that we have.
Yes, I know. And I said maybe we need to think about this a little bit. What I'd like to kind of reflect on is status and what status meant through the generations. So for my grandmother's generation, status meant you were a homemaker, you had a husband who could provide, and you could raise your children and your family. And my grandmother did that and was in that role until my grandfather came back very troubled from the war, massive PTSD, no support, no help, no even talk about mental health back then or PTSD or any of it. So he did like many did, and he used alcohol as a way in order to cope. And slowly and eventually, he was a top engineer and a really incredible business person and inventor, and they lost everything. His, mental health started to decline, and my grandmother had no choice but to go out and work. And this is a woman who had 5 children, who had not been exposed to that. Her sisters and other family members who were in, I'm putting up air quotes for those that are just listening, proper, situations where their husbands were the main provider, didn't have to do that. So there was a real sort of status or a shame around going into the labor force at that time. She did all kinds of things, from being a personal support worker to being an operator. You used to call in and like someone would actually connect the calls on a switchboard, and did all kinds of different jobs and continued to work. When my mom came around, it was only about working. My mom had to work, and my grandmother helped raise me. My mom being a single mom at the time, it was like she was always at work, and I just knew her to be working, but it wasn't the balance. Like it was literally like, I need support and someone else to watch you for the most part while I'm working, and, working low wage, minimum wage jobs, trying to make ends meet and shift work and all of that. Fast forward to me, and I was like, well, I want to be, again, it's like you're trying to rebel against the thing that you saw growing up. And I was like, well, I want to work, but I want to, work in a career where I can really do well, and I can, help support all of this. And I want to still be an active, involved mother and all of these things. And there started out this journey of I can do it all. And I started so young in that pursuit, both with taking on a very, very high level corporate career and having my babies pretty young for our generation. Like I had my first at 26, I had my second, just before 30. That was early for us. Like none of my friends were really in that space, and none of my cohort was in the high pressured work role that I was in as well, leading a national company. So with all of that, I thought, I'm the one, I've broken the chain. This is status. Having awards, having people photograph me and my children and and all of this. And I was just so like a hungry ghost for more. And the reality is it was not filling that void. I didn't realize it fully at the time, did all the things, the numbing, the wine mommy culture on the weekends, like whatever it is. And in the end, I had like a full-on breakdown. That I still worked my way through. But yeah, the burnout was real. And I reflect now that we're coming into this full circle moment where there are many, many women, and this is a privileged position to be in, and many are trying to figure out how to even make this happen, that reclaiming the status of being able to be at home, reclaiming the status of being able to rear your children without having to work if you don't want to, is becoming again status.
Yes.
Like it's the new pushback to that feminist, we burn the bras, we put on the, corporate gray suit and the shoulder pads, and now we want to like do something entirely different.
Yeah.
I don't fall in either or of the category. I don't fit there, but this is an interesting conversation. And I sent you a podcast actually about this conversation of unless we set up our businesses to be providers for us as women, how will we as women entrepreneurs ever really get to do what you preach, which is to follow our own cycles and to be able to be in better rhythm with our neurophysiology and the environment and the planet and our children, if we are trying to do this like hustle everything all? Like how do you even do that? And what do you see in the women that you're supporting?
Yeah, it's interesting where we are societally, because it all has to do with values, right? And values have changed over time. And I think the values are shifting now towards health and well-being and away from things like status and accumulation of wealth. Not that those things aren't desired anymore, but I feel like there's a higher value placed on health and well-being because there's so little of it, or there's such a big lack of it. And this is, men, women, everyone. For women specifically, we're in kind of this identity crisis moment because the feminist movement told us you need to get out there and work and claim your place in the workforce and grind and earn money and be a strong, independent woman. My mom every day told me growing up, you're going to be a strong, independent woman. Don't have children until you have your career first. Mm-hmm. And that was the number one priority because she had kids while she was trying to create a career, and she was never able to, and she couldn't complete school because she had kids. And then it was a whole big stressful thing where sometimes she was working 3 jobs at a time while raising 4 of us kids. And it was a total disaster for her. It was a real nightmare situation. Mm-hmm. Not that it was all the time, but it was very, very stressful. Mm-hmm. And she paid dearly with her body, with her mind. So now we're coming into a place where we tried that on. We all went out into the workforce. We started grinding. We started losing our health. We started losing our mental well-being. And now we're coming to a place where, yes, we still want to have career. We still want to have education. We also want to have a family. So where is the balance and flow in that? Is it possible to have it all? And you hear all kinds of different experts, whether it be in business or mental health or psychology, and they're saying different things. Yes, women can have it all, and they're pushing the narrative of grind it out in the workplace and be successful and also give everything to raise your children. But we know where that ends. That ends up in major, major burnout, mental health issues, physical health issues, right? Because it's hard to do it that way.
Shame and depression and addiction, because the reality is anyone who's doing it all in that setup is paying for a lot to happen.
Exactly.
So if you don't have that support, it's not even possible.
Well, and so then the other option, the flip side of that is don't pursue a career, become a stay-at-home mom. And that's also not resonating. So these are kind of 2 options that have been very prevalent in the recent past, the recent last 100 years, right? Mm-hmm. Either stay-at-home mom, homemaker, whatever that may be, or do that and have a career, but not in a healthy, balanced way, in a way where you need to achieve. Women often feel like because we entered the workforce later, because we're kind of starting with a chip on our shoulder, because we get paid less to do the same jobs, we have to work harder to have the same success. And it actually is true. That is a true statement. However, we need, as we shift our values to mental health becoming more valuable, to physical health becoming more valuable, to connections, relationships becoming more valuable, we also need to enable our economy to shift with us to align with those values. Because then we have a whole new economic value system that we're working with that's aligned with our actual true core values of our life. And when we do that, that allows an opportunity and an opening for women to do things differently. We have to understand that biological women and biological men, just based on their physiology, operate in different ways. There are sex differences that have to be acknowledged. Enough of this trying to make everybody the same, because we're not the same from a physiological standpoint. So when we look at the structures that we currently have, we see that they align really well with the male biology and neurophysiology specifically, the way that it's designed. Set up on a 24-hour repeating system, 7 days a week, 9 to 5. Consistency is the key. All of these things that we've all been taught, right?
Yeah.
That's how the male biology literally works. And it makes perfect sense because our structures, our policies, our systems, all of this was built from the men who are working in these spaces. So it makes total sense that it is catered to them and their needs and how their biology works. For women and biological females specifically, their body works different. It is not a 24-hour repeating system. It's a month-long repeating system with consistent changes every day, not consistency, consistent changes. The only thing consistent about the female biology is that it's consistently shifting and changing.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we have to work differently. We have to ebb and flow with our biology and with our needs as they ebb and flow throughout the month, and not in a consistent way, because that will lead to burnout every single time. So come back to the question, can women have it all in terms of a family, a career, success, money, status, whatever? I think yes, that's my personal opinion. However, it's going to require huge, huge changes in our policies, in our systems, in our structures to align with the new value system that we are ushering in as a society.
This is reminding me of a client that I recently worked with. So this is a case study to put things in a tangible understanding of how these concepts are showing up in our lives. This particular client is on maternity leave, and she's now starting to think ahead. She's almost at the tail end of it, starting to think ahead about how to incorporate career back into her life. She wasn't really so happy with the place that she left, so she's opening herself to other possibilities. And when she met with me, she was completely paralyzed, thinking that I can't put myself out there. I'm not even excited. I don't feel motivated. And it was confusing for her because she prided herself on being like an achiever and a go-getter and all these things that we wear as a badge of honor. And she said, I can't understand. Like, is it because I became a mother? Is it because I'm not ready to leave my baby? Is it just like, what is happening? I can't even get myself to properly look at the jobs or go on LinkedIn and meet people or apply or talk to recruiters. I'm just paralyzed by this whole process. So we needed to do a little bit of work. And when I work with clients, there's different tools I use. Sometimes we obviously do cognitive and we talk about certain things, but sometimes I like to do somatic as well. Get out of the mind and really understand the insight and the wisdom that comes forward just by tuning into our body. And when I did that with her, and we did a little bit of breath work to ground, to really start feeling the sensations in our body. When I talked to her about work, the first thing she said, as far as what she's really resisting and rejecting, is the drive to work. She said, now that I'm actually going into jobs that are posted, like most people are asking us to go back to the office these days, like virtual or remote or flexible work hours don't feel like they're accessible anymore. It's far and few in between, versus in COVID, it was like the norm. And now it feels like companies are actually requesting people to go back into the office.
They're starting to.
They're starting to more on a full-time basis, and that's just the nature of things. And when she originally judged herself for, I may not be able to juggle both, or I'm losing parts of myself, the core, my issue is not going back to work. My issue is all this hustle as far as the drive and the commute, and she lived a little bit outside the city, so it's at least 2 hours of commute a day, if not more in certain areas. Depends on where this job is going to be. So that's what she was resisting, and helping her get to that gave her such a sigh of relief that frees up now her creative powers in order to find alternatives, and it was helpful.
It is, for sure. It's interesting because, well, one thing I want to point out first, we've talked about women who want a career, women who want a family. There are a lot of women who don't want to have a family at this point. I have a lot of people in my circle who are opting out of having children, who want to have the DINK, double income sort of household with no kids. And they want to travel, and they want to live, and they want to nomad, and they don't want to go down that road.
Which is surprising to me. Like, when I grew up in the Middle East, so this was never a conversation that I ever thought I would be having with my friends, because it's in the Middle East, family is a core value and it's a high priority. It's just expected that you have kids, and more people than not have kids in these parts of the world.
For sure. I think there's a number of things that are contributing to that decision. One is that we live in a world that it feels kind of scary to bring children into this world. Like, I know when I speak to some of my friends, they're like, I don't feel comfortable bringing a young person into this world. So that's one piece that I hear, which is sad. There's also just this new concept of like ripping apart apart the traditional heteronormative, we work, we go to school, we do this, we build this house, like for what? We're in this particular time in our lives where most of us and most of the younger generation can never dream to afford to have all of those luxuries of the 2-car house and the suburban whatever. Like it doesn't exist. And people are also saying, what is this whole notion of an economy, a system, a structure, saying that my whole value is my productivity and my work, and I can chip away some money to maybe have some fun when I'm older and I retire, which most people have worked so bad and they're so out of balance and alignment that they're dying before they're ever even having that opportunity. Yep. And people are saying, I want to live. I want to expand my consciousness. I want to travel. I want to sleep with who I want to sleep with. I want to cohabitate with who I want to cohabitate with. Maybe someone else a friend of mine will have a children and will chip in to raise. Like there's just so many different ways that things are starting to take shape or come out of shape. And I think that that is the future economy that we live in, where there are so many other choices, options, and decisions. And that is the systemic change that's starting to occur, is just in deciding how we want to live and what we want. And I know that when I reflect on the early years that I spent where I didn't even take maternity leaves, and we have a pretty decent maternity leave policy here in Canada. I mean, compared to the United States, you guys have 6 weeks.
Yeah, and it's not a national policy. It's up to each individual company. They don't have to offer it.
They don't have to even offer the 6 weeks?
No.
What? I didn't even know that.
That's crazy.
No, it's up to the organization what they want to offer.
Well, here in Canada, like we can now take
18
up
months.
to 18 months. Like there's a lot. I did not take anything. I did not take any time. I went straight back to work. I did all of the things. Obviously, in running a company, felt like I had the pressure that I had to do that. But it comes back down to being the breadwinner of the household. At the time in my household, I was the breadwinner. We relied on that income. I had a partner, my husband at the time, who had a chronic health condition. We had a mortgage. We had bills. We had things. I did not feel that we would be able to sustain our lifestyle even on the maternity leave benefit that I would get. And so I did not feel that there was fully the choice. Now, could I have changed things? Could I have done things? Yes. When I look back on all of it though, this notion that I was successful because I could push through, I was superhuman, I was doing all of these things. What I sacrificed, I did not realize until the pandemic came, until everything stopped, when I actually got to feel how out of joint my whole system was, that I could not sit in my house. In that beginning, being with my children in my own house was the hardest thing I had ever done. And I've done lots of hard things because my whole nervous system was revved to a level that I didn't even recognize or realize. And again, because I think I was so young still at the time, I wasn't paying all the price yet of what I was doing. But this is a setup for long-term chronic disease, cancer, infertility, like the list goes on. And this is what we are doing in the Western world today. We are running ourselves to have more stuff, to have more things, to say we can, for the result of what? We've lost the time actually connecting with our families, our children, our partners. We're in sexless marriages. Literally, our pussies are dry. Nothing's going in there. And it's true because your whole physiological makeup is not designed for that pace. Yep. And what ends up happening, and I'm seeing it a lot now, I have a lot of very broad swath of women of all ages that are in my network. When I'm talking to some of the wiser women who are now transitioning out of menopause or are in perimenopause, there is a grief that is not even, we haven't even tapped into the level of grief that is being experienced. And why? I would say because all of a sudden your time, that phase of your life is over. And it's not that, oh, your life's over. None of that. But that phase of your life is over and you didn't even get to enjoy it. And I don't mean by just making babies. I mean by having sex, by living your life, by being nourished, by being in the prime of your body. And instead you donkeyed yourself through this thing for fucking what? And it's probably you're sitting in a pile of debt like me at the end with nothing.
Well, I have to say there is a scientific basis for what you said about the correlation between dry vaginas and burnout. Right?
Great. Let's hear about it.
Let's bring it back to that.
Awesome.
Because it is true.
It is.
To have a nice, juicy vagina that is ready for whatever may come, that is wanted.
It wants. That it
wanted.
desires.
With consent.
With all the proper consent. In order to have that, you require hormones to be healthy and balanced. So we're not just talking about the sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Absolutely, you have to have that in order. That's like number one. But we're really talking about the whole neuroendocrine cascade that is deeply impacted by cortisol dysregulation. So when we're stressed chronically, which means that our sympathetic nervous system is clamped down, turned on, and is unable to turn off because we think we're running from the lion every moment of every day, when really it's just our schedule and our demands of our relationships and families and whatever else. These are the things that are the lion that's chasing us now, but it never turns off. It's chronic. So once that goes on for a while, which means that our cortisol is elevated chronically, after a while, what happens is that system, which is the adrenal system, starts to shut down. So our cortisol actually stops producing like it should. And so it basically, the whole system starts to shut down.
Yeah.
What happens is when the adrenals burn out, it actually starts to lean on the ovarian hormones. And so we talked about how estrogen and progesterone, those ovarian hormones, are the key driver of the female global physiology. So that whole biological rhythm that we talked about, that 28-day cycle, that's unlike the male cycle that is a daily 24-hour cycle. That whole thing is driven by the ovarian hormones and relies on those to run everything: the brain, the nervous system, the metabolism, the musculoskeletal system, the cardiovascular system. Everything is reliant on that heartbeat, which is the ovarian hormone cycle. And these hormones are not just hormones for reproduction. These are hormones that affect every part of the body. We have receptors in our brain for estrogen and progesterone in the female brain because these are very key and vital neurotransmitters, just for instance, and they affect how our other neurotransmitters work in our brain. Our excitatory, our downregulatory neurotransmitters are all impacted by the levels of estrogen and progesterone. So that's how intricate this whole system is.
What transmitter makes your pussy wet, Kayla?
Oxytocin.
Okay.
Yeah. So oxytocin actually is the master neuroendocrine regulator of women, of the female body. So let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to oxytocin because that's also important. So when cortisol is dysregulated for a long period of time, it starts to put pressure on the ovarian hormones and starts to burn out the ovarian hormones. So when women are in burnout, and they've been in burnout for a while, every single time you test their sex hormones, and that's also burnt out. Their sex hormones are burned out. This happened to me when I was like 27. I was experiencing extreme adrenal fatigue and burnout. Went and got everything tested. Yeah, cortisol's totally screwed. All of that. And got my sex hormones tested, and my doctor was like, okay, well, you have the hormones of a 90-year-old woman.
Oh my God.
And I was like, what do you mean? I'm 27.
Yeah.
I haven't even had children yet. I haven't even had the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, this is really bad. And so it took me over 10 years, I'm 37 now, to reel that back in and heal from it. And I still have to do a lot of work to heal from that at this point. So how does that all go back to a dry vagina, right? Because you need those essential hormones to keep everything juicy down there, not to mention desire and oxytocin and all the other things that are required to make that happen.
Yeah.
But just in order to have a healthy, functioning reproductive parts, you have to have your hormones in balance and in order.
My pancreas is functioning at 30% apparently. So all these different things, and I was so overwhelmed as far as some of the information I got there, but also the contradiction and the overwhelming information. So first, the overwhelming nature of what we're talking about here, because we're talking about so many different systems. Second, the contradiction in information, because you go to a traditional doctor.
And third, what do we do?
And third, what do we do about that?
Yeah.
Where do we start? For someone like me or for anyone listening that is wanting to take care of their health and make it a priority.
The unfortunate truth that women have to understand, really everyone needs to understand, is that up until about 10 years ago, we have not been studying the female body. And what I mean by this is going from the very beginning of scientific inquiry, 200 plus years ago, when we started studying the human body and biology and health, and it started to get more and more technologically advanced. From there, we started to learn more and more and more. All of that time period up until about 10 years ago, we have almost no data on the female body, the female biology. And what we do know is very based around reproductive health and reproduction itself. Not to mention anything about the female biological rhythm, not to mention anything about the female brain, which is a totally different system than the male brain, not to mention anything about any of the female physiology, which is a totally different system than the male physiology, which is now what we're finally understanding as we start to study the female biology and start to understand that there are significant sex differences that do matter, that create real changes in how health is experienced or not experienced. So because of that, we have a database about health that is 99.9% male-centric, which is why we default to the male model in our biological textbooks, in health class, in medical school. We are taught the male model because that's the data that we have and that's the systems that we understand. Now we're starting to understand that there are major differences and we cannot pretend that the two systems are the same, even though we have had to, and we've had to make big assumptions that the systems operate in the same way in order to put the blanket of healthcare over everyone, right? And your experience as a woman being let down by the medical system, being confused about your health, not understanding how to best take care of yourself. My experience of having fully burned out hormones by the age of 27, Rhiannon's experience of burnout and her health issues that have come from that as well, and the experience of the vast majority of women is the same. We don't understand our bodies. Our medical professionals don't understand our bodies. Our doctors, our researchers, our educators, our scientists, our policymakers, none of them understand it because that information is just simply not widely available. And what is out there is very confusing and conflicting because we have so little information. So unless you know how to pick up a study, read it, and understand if it actually applies to you as a woman, and you as a woman of a certain age, it will be hard to decipher, does this apply to me or does this not apply to me?
Now I'm even more depressed since I've asked that question. So it's just been downhill since then.
Okay, so
what's the solution? How do we start to learn what the heck is going on here?
So a couple of things. One thing.
Also, no pressure.
One major focal point with 3 points on it. I call it a stool with 3 legs. And this is the centerpiece of all of women's health. And if you have all 3 legs of the stool, then you will have your health and your well-being and your mental health, right? So the 3 legs of the stool is also what I call the women's health trifecta, which is sugar, stress, and sex. I'm talking about hormones and the hormones that regulate everything else in the body. So sugar, what is that? Insulin, right? Insulin sensitivity, blood sugar regulation. That's one pillar. Sex, I'm talking about our sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone specifically.
I thought you meant have a little sugar, have a little sex, and lay down. And that sounded pretty good.
You could do that. But if these systems are not regulated, it's going to do nothing for you. We're talking about the sex hormones. Then the third one sugar, stress, sex. So stress, cortisol, right? We're talking about burnout. We're talking about the adrenals. It's all interrelated. So none of these things exist without the other things. None of these things operate without major influence by the other. If your blood sugar is dysregulated, likely that's very much interrelated and caused by your stress levels. If your sex hormones are burned out, that's also caused by adrenal burnout, right? So none of these things exist in a silo. So going down to that core piece, there's a few things that are always a starting point for any woman, no matter who she might be working with, whether you're working with a very talented health coach, whether you're working with an integrative doctor, a functional medicine doctor, a naturopathic doctor. These are the places where you'll find some women's health experts that may actually know something. But you always want to start by, first of all, measuring your sex hormones, because again, this is the key to your whole biological rhythm.
Sure.
It's the centerpiece. It's the heartbeat. And if you're postmenopausal, you still want to get a full hormonal panel to understand where you are in that continuum as well. You can get a Dutch test, which is a dry urine test that looks at not only your levels of your hormones, but also the metabolites. So this is really important to know, how is your body metabolizing and processing your hormones. So that's really critical. And in addition, you want to get your blood levels as well, which is what you would get just traditionally in your regular doctor's office. They can also run a thyroid panel, which would be really important to understand the how it's interacting with your thyroid and metabolic function as well, because it's all interrelated again. So starting with looking at your hormones there, and then you can measure your blood sugar levels as well. This is something we talked about earlier that I recommended for you, would be getting a continuous glucose monitor, which you can get pretty much over the counter now through different apps online that you can get, and looking at what is your blood sugar patterns, not only related to eating, but also related to sleep, also related to stress, also related to your work schedule. And you'll see that your blood sugar is impacted by all of these things, not just by eating sugary foods. So getting a complete picture of where you are is important. And unfortunately, because we are women, because so little is known about our bodies and how they work, we do have to do a lot of investigative efforts, data collection on ourselves before we can move forward with any kind of treatment or any kind of intervention.
This is reminding me when Rhiannon and I talk about avoidance or money avoidance, and how sometimes the fear of the unknown has a harder impact on our body than even sometimes the worst case scenario. So sometimes when we're talking about this angle, the health angle, it feels very overwhelming. And sometimes somebody may not even pursue any fit because it's like, where do I even start? But when you break it down into, here's the 3 things that we can focus on, and you don't have to do it alone. You can work with a health coach or a practitioner that can support you through that process. But getting that data is so gonna be empowering 100%. So you can make the right changes.
Yeah, that is a great piece of advice as the starting plot to how we're going to now end this show so that we don't all want to jump off the proverbial bridge. I remember I did the Dutch test. It's been a while, so I probably have to do it again. But what was interesting to me, because I always thought, oh, I'm stressed, so I'll have high cortisol. I had low cortisol. So that meant I've already burned through all my cortisol. So that was really interesting. She was like, you must be exhausted. Like, how are you functioning? And I was like, what do you mean? This isn't just normal. This isn't how we feel. So let's talk about this for a second, because one thing that I am starting to become really frustrated by personally, and it's interesting at Conscious Economics, I don't want to promote this idea of self-care as a thing that you can buy. Self-care is a retreat you can go on. Self-care is an app that you breathe into and everything's going to be fine. Like, we are talking about deep systemic issues. That is what it is. Commodification of self-care is not going to solve it. And a lot of this self-care stuff, and Aseel, you always say this, it makes us women feel like we're failing even at that. I can't even self-care properly, And so it gets to this particular space where I myself have gone down that trap of just commodifying my own self-care and just buying healthier options, but I'm still spending just as much money and I'm still in the same cycles, let's be honest. And is my health that much better? Yes, I've made some significant changes like quitting drinking and whatever. Like those are real things. Those are going to change the marker. But I think one of the biggest things that I can contribute to this, it's about your emotions as well. And it's about actually taking time. This is not necessarily saying therapy, although therapy, yes, is a part of it. But I'm saying getting to the place where we slow down enough so we can even tap in and feel the intelligence of your body, which brings things up when you slow down because it wants to move it through. Emotion is energy in motion. It's meant to move. And because we have stored so much of it and actually try to counteract the feelings by keeping busy, by buying more, by seeing more people, by talking more, by scrolling more, we aren't letting the intelligence and wisdom of our body just do what it does. So what does that look like for me now? I have started a practice. It's actually kind of interesting and probably sounds strange, but I lay down, I set my clock for 30 minutes. I go into a space where I know I can be on my own and I can make noise if I need to. So generally, I don't like to do it when the kids are home because if they hear me wailing or crying, they could be worried that something's wrong. And actually, nothing's wrong. Something's right. I'm just moving what I need to move. So I'll lay down. I will do a few breaths just to feel my body, kind of do a body scan, like my feet, my whatever, and then feel, okay, where does there feel a heaviness today? I go into that area. So a lot of the times it's my heart. I'll go into the heart. Okay, is there a thought? Is there a feeling? Is there a person? Is there a situation? Feel into it. And then I start to move, sound, moan, move. Generally speaking, it'll end in a full wailing cry, maybe a yell, maybe a scream. And eventually a feeling like it came out, like you just had an amazing release. And I find I have more space. I have more tolerance. I'm less quick to anger. And this is what I'm starting to do. It's not costing anything. I'm making this up, but it's doing something.
Actually, it's funny you said you're making it up because it's actually a tool I use with my clients. It's
Really?
I call it the emotional release tool. And there's a great doctor, Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, the Stroke of Insight TED Talk. She's a neuroscientist and she was having a stroke. So she was literally studying the stroke from a real first-time person. Yeah. She studied that for an emotion to go through the body, neurochemicals, it's only a 90-second cycle. When you think about it for the first while, you're like, that doesn't make sense. I'm usually stuck in my emotions for hours or days. And that's because you re-triggered the thought that then re-triggered the emotion, and you're stuck in that vibration or that cycle because you're re-triggering the thought, which after the 90 seconds is a choice. The first 90 seconds is the emotion doing its thing. Beyond that is a choice. So that's an empowering thing to know just by itself.
Interesting.
But the way I do it with my clients is I get them to get into their body, pinpoint an emotion that they want to fully express, then release. You express it before you release it. Sometimes we just don't even want to feel it because of how uncomfortable it is. And when we start training ourselves to recognize the emotion, have emotional literacy, to name our emotions, now understand how they feel in our body, what sensations and what body parts are connected with that emotion. We can magnify, maybe exaggerate the emotion.
Yes,
and then
exaggerate
exactly.
It. Yeah.
And then we release it.
Yes.
So I actually do this with my clients.
Well, and another tool that Aseel, I know you and I love, is the emotion wheel.
The
Wheel
emotion
of emotion.
wheel. Yeah.
If you just Google that, so if you're listening, you can find it on Pinterest, you can Google it, the wheel of emotion. It labels and color coordinates all the range of sadness, the range of anger, the range of joy, the range. And there's so many that you can actually start to understand what it is that you're thinking, because there's a difference between spite and anger. You know,
sure.
There's a difference between all of these subtle different pieces. So building that emotional literacy with yourself. And thank you for that point, because yes, and I am an over-exaggerator. Everyone who knows me knows that I love to over-exaggerate. I over-exaggerate the emotion that's coming out. That's the practice. So I'll feel the feeling in the heart. Okay, it feels a little... Like you just let it rip, you know?
Yeah.
You let it out and then boy, do you feel good. Do you want to put your hands behind your back and zip down and take a little nap? What do you got, Aseel, for us?
What do you want to leave us with?
So one of the things that I feel is very empowering when you and I talk about these things, we can get easily lost when we talk about systems and all the different policymakers and how a systemic change needs to happen, because absolutely, we all agree. But it's also equally important to recognize the power we have within ourselves to focus on the change and the ownership and the autonomy we have as far as what do we want to focus on in our own lives. And that brings power back. When we get lost in the systems of capitalism and patriarchy and all these different pieces, it's really hard to understand where do we fit on all that. And sometimes I talk to clients and they're talking about the fear they have about ongoing rising costs and policy changes, politicians changing only like to the worse, if anything. And sometimes you look at that and you feel so helpless because it feels like the whole world needs to change. So I really like to bring it back into the power we have within, the importance to focus on the magnitude of changes that we can create as far as our own work, taking our own work very seriously and committing to that. So establishing the right rituals, establishing the right support systems in your life, and really reimagining the belief systems that you've carried for so long and recognizing that these too can change. Any belief system that's not feasible or serving you is something that can be challenged and shifted. One of the things that I really love, one of the teachers taught me is, for example, this phrase, I think, therefore I am, and the over-identification we have with this thought. But this has been taken as such a beautiful proverb that we all know, and but it established a paradigm as far as how we operate as human species. And a lot of the proverbs symbolize what our collective belief systems are built on. What she rewired that belief to be is, I breathe, therefore I am. I breathe, therefore I am. It's not I think. It's not my thoughts. It's not all these different parts that actually are not who we are. Just our breath is enough. Is enough. I am. I breathe, therefore I prosper. I breathe, therefore I'm enough. And rewiring some of that is so powerful. So I really encourage anybody who's listening to start navigating the different beliefs you hold about yourself. And you know that by looking at the results. You look at the outcomes, because the outcomes of your life is the first noticeable thing. What's actually happening.
Yeah.
It's clear for you to go through the inventory of your life and see what's working and what's not. That tells you if something is off. Below the outcome, you look at behavior. Behavior is also very obvious. Yeah. You know what you're doing. Below the behavior, this is not everybody has awareness on what's below that layer. And that's where we get into the thought, emotion, and then physical sensation component. But it's important to start recognizing how all these patterns play with one another. Similar to the 3-step stool that you talk about, these are the 4 ingredients that I talk about. The somatic experience, what's happening in the body, the emotion, the thought, and then behavior, which ultimately create the outcomes of our lives. So I really want to leave the listeners here, because yes, we can easily get lost when we talk about systems and everything in the world that needs to be changed. And we are obviously passionate about creating that change, which is why we exist and we collaborate. But what can we take home with us and change within our environment? As simple as sometimes redecorating our home, simplifying our life, decluttering our belief systems, like all these things that can make a massive shift that then supports the systemic change.
I love that. And that's what we always say at Conscious Economics. The new economy is you.
The new economy is
you. The new economy is you. And to end off, I think it's important to say, if you're waiting for the system to change, if you're waiting for someone to come point at you and say, hey, little lady, you look tired, I'm going to come help you out, it ain't going to happen. So we have to be our own hero. We have to be our own knight in shining armor. And I think our sisterhood, friendship, talking, being honest is such an important pillar to that. the community is such an important pillar. Coming back to community, coming back to sharing, being honest, telling the truth, you know. And I think to all the women that are listening out there, if you're a woman right now, or you're anybody that's listening to this conversation and it feels applicable to you because these systems are wearing you down in some way, if you're at the point where your best friend calls and you want to skip the call because you're too tired to talk, to update about your life, if you're feeling like you're, you know, another thing that you have to do for your child's thing feels overwhelming, if you're snapping at people that you love, if your pussy ain't wet, you're probably in a burnout, sister. So there is space and room. We're all going to get our Dutch tests. Let's hold ourselves accountable to that.
Yes.
Maybe we'll have an episode where we'll look at them and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
I
I'm
like
ready to do
that.
it.
So I'm doing that. I'm going to go cry really loud in my bedroom again. And then I'm going to see what belief systems I can declutter next.
Take an honest
Great.
inventory on my life and see what I need to.
And you can do that while you're away. So that sounds
Yes,
really
I'm really
good. I love it.
excited.
Thank you, Kayla, so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
It's
Where
been a
can our
pleasure.
listeners find or follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on the socials, Dr. Kayla Osterhoff, and you can check out my website, HerBiorhythm.com. There's a lot of free resources there and different courses and offerings around the female neuropsychophysiology.
I love it. And for those listeners that want to check out Conscious Economics, consciouseconomics.ca, Aseel and I will be doing a whole suite of episodes this season. We're really excited to have you back, Aseel, after your maternity leave. And yeah, for all of you that are listening, stay wet.